योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचाम् मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिम् गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुर्गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः हरिः ओम्. So we are looking at Sutra 2.20. Drashta Drishimatraha Shuddhopi Pratyyanupashyaha. And there we were looking at one line in the Bhashya that came quite early in the commentary that said, Sabuddherna Sarupo Natyantam Virupa iti. So here Sa is the Purusha. So this Purusha, Buddherna Sarupaha. It is not identical to the Buddhi. Natyantam Virupa. Nor is it entirely different. Now the first part of it, that it is not same as the Buddhi, is something we covered in our previous session. And we were just embarking on the next part of it, where it said, okay, if it is not entirely identical, or if it is not same as the Buddhi, let's just say that it is different. But then Vyasa came in and he says, Natyantam Virupaha. Oh, because Vyasa himself said, Astu tarhi Virupa iti. Okay, then different. But then he said, Natyantam Virupaha, not entirely different. Kasmat, how come? So here we continue. So Vyasa says, Shuddhopi asau Pratyayanupashyaha. So even though he is Shuddha, Shuddha means Malarahitaha. So there is no blemish. It's completely pure. Shuddhopi asau, the he, this one, Pratyayanupashyaha. He has the Anupashyati. So like we saw last time, the Pratyaya, which is the sort of the Jnana imprint on the Buddhi. Buddhi, as the instrument of knowledge, has a cognitive imprint, which is a Pratyaya Vritti on the Buddhi. So that Pratyaya, for that, the Purusha Anupashyati, which means it gets echoed in the Purusha, or it gets reflected in the Purusha, so to speak. So for the Purusha, as we have seen, the only Vishaya, the only object, with Purusha as the seer, as the Drashta, the only seen is the Chitta. So that is why it was said, it was a Sadajñataha, Purushaha Sadajñataha, because always the Chitta is in, so to speak, contact with the Purusha. So the seen is always ever present, and the Pratyaya, that is the imprint on the seen, on the Chitta, because of Buddhi's own act as instrument of cognition. The Buddhi is receiving things from the Indriyas, so it is seeing, hearing, smelling and all of that, which is causing a cognitive imprint. That gets reflected or echoed, as we had seen, on the Purusha. And therefore, even though the Purusha is Shuddha or pure and unchanging, he is also Pratyayanupashyaha. He is having the cognitive imprint of the Buddhi, which is known as the Pratyaya, getting reflected in quotes or echoed onto him. So he is Pratyayanupashyaha. So the Purusha, it is Pratyayanupashyaha. Now he elaborates, Vyasa elaborates, Yataha Pratyayam Bauddham Anupashyati. So the Bauddha Pratyaya, which means the Pratyaya of the Buddhi, is the Purusha Anupashyati, which is what we just described. It says, and that is why. So Vyasa is again reminding us, and that is why he is known as Pratyayanupashyaha. Here the Purusha is known as Pratyayanupashyaha because Pratyayam Bauddham Anupashyati, because the Buddhi's Pratyaya gets, so to speak, perceived, though it is not the normal perception like the buddhi does. That is why it is known as anupashyati, and we described that in detail, because the normal perception that the buddhi does, it is known as tadakara karitvam. Okay, so the tadakara parinamaha. So the buddhi's perception is of the nature of the buddhi as though taking the form of, or the jnana of the buddhi is taking the form of the object being seen. With what kinds of objects? Gavadi ghatadayaha. So with the pot and cow or whatever. The knowledge of the buddhi is as though the buddhi as an instrument, it is taking the form of the cow or the ghata or the pot and so on. But here the Purusha is not undergoing any such transformation. It is ever unchanging. That is why the term anupashyati is seen, and here in English we have described that as reflected or echoed or so on. So yataha pratyayam bauddham anupashyati. Tam anupashyan na tadatmapi tadatmaka iva pratyavabhasate. So when doing that, when the buddhi, when the Purusha is doing this, or is, the word doing is not right because the Purusha never does, but the act of, or the phenomenon of this anupashyati, that when that is happening and the object of it is the pratyaya of the buddhi, then the Purusha atadatma api. So he is not of the Purusha, it is not of the form of that object, it is not of the form of the buddhi, it is not of the nature of the buddhi at all. However, tadatmaka iva, it appears as though it is of the form of the object. Tadatmaka iva pratyavabhasate. It is as though it is of that form. The other example that was given earlier is like a pure crystal, and when it reflects, say you get a red flower next to it, the crystal appears red. So there is no change in the form of the crystal, there is absolutely no transformation that has happened to the crystal, but it looks as though, right, it is of the pure crystal has taken that form. So in a similar manner here, atadatma api tadatmakam, even though if it is not of that form or nature at all, tadatmaka iva, tadatmakaha iva pratyavabhasate, it appears as though it is of that form or nature. Then Vyasa quotes, he says, Tata choktam, therefore it is said, Aparinaminihi bhoktru shaktihi apratisankrama cha parinamini arthe pratisankranta iva tadvrittim anupatati. Okay, so even though this bhoktru shakti, so we have seen the Purusha being referred to as Chiti Shakti. Here it is the Bhoktru Shakti that is being referred to, the experiencer, the Shakti, the Shakti of experiencing. So the Bhoktru Shakti, Aparinamini, means ever unchanging, does not undergo transformation. Apratisankrama, it doesn't go out into objects, right? So in Sankhya Yoga, the normal process of cognition is as though the buddhi or the indriyas are going to the objects, and touch the influence of the indriyas touches the object, and that is how the sensing happens. So here apratisankrama, so there is no sanchara, so there is no going towards. So it is aparinamini, no transformations, apratisankrama cha parinamini arthe pratisankranta iva. So it appears as though it is changing, appears as though it is also going towards the Vishayas, because tad vrittim anupatati. It is as it were, it is reflecting that particular state of the cognitive imprint. So the vritti refers to the state of the chitta due to the pratyaya. So that vrittim anupatati, as though it follows and takes up that particular vritti. तस्याश्च प्राप्त चैतन्य उपग्रह रूपायाः बुद्धिवृत्तेः अनुकार मात्रतया buddhi vritti avishishta hi jnana vritti iti akhyayate. So this is a quite an interesting and significant statement. So let's understand this. It's a sort of a longish sentence. Tasyaha. Okay, so tasyaha is referring to buddhi. So it is saying of the buddhi. Tasyaha. Now what kind of buddhi? What is the nature of this buddhi? Prapta chaitanya upagraha rupaya. Ha. So the buddhi is prapta chaitanya, means it has obtained its sentience, it has obtained the consciousness, right? And we know that the consciousness it has obtained due to the influence of the Purusha. So the buddhi is prapta chaitanya. Prapta chaitanya upagraha rupaya. So it is it has obtained its sentience and it is sort of connected to the buddhi, to the Purusha. So even the satellites are known as upagraha. Okay. So just like the satellites are revolving around the main planet, the buddhi in that sense is an upagraha, and it is, and the graha, the other thing is the grahanam. So it is also taking in and sensing, and it is, in some sense, it is the instrument of sensing, so that, and not the sensor itself, because the Gruhitru is the Purusha, the one who is ultimately the sensor, the Bhoktru, the Gruhitru is the Purusha. So the buddhi is being described here as Prapta Chaitanya, the one who has obtained the sentience from elsewhere, and Upagraha Rupayaha, so it is Upagraha Rupa, it is of that nature. Upagraha Rupayaha Buddhi Vrittehe. Okay, so of the Buddhi Vritti, which is the current state of the buddhi due to whatever cognition or whatever else, memory and so on, that is happening there, of that buddhi vritti, anukara matrataya, because the Purusha has this thing that is described as anupashyati or anukaroti, so that is known as anukara. So anukara matrataya, solely, merely due to that thing that is anukara matra, which is a reflection or echo or whatever we call it, anukara matrataya, by that kind of anukara, buddhi vritti avishishta. So as though not different, avishishta means non-distinct. So as though not different from the buddhi vritti avishishta hi jnana vritti riti akhyayate. So now this is interesting. So there is a buddhi vritti and a jnana vritti, which is what we have seen when we discussed pratyaksha pramanam right in the beginning of the first chapter. But let's look at it again. So there is one thing called a buddhi vritti. So buddhi vritti is due to the activity of the buddhi, which is through the indriyas and so on. It is taking the shape and form of the object that it is perceiving. So the perceiving could be seeing, smelling, whatever, or it could even be smriti, memory. So the buddhi has a certain vritti. But when do we say that it has become jnana vritti? So we had seen a term called paurusheya bodha when we looked at pratyaksha pramanam. So when that particular buddhi state gets reflected or echoed via the Purusha, that is when that buddhi vritti turns into jnana vritti. So the buddhi is bringing in a certain thing through indriyas, but the paurusheya bodha or the jnana happens solely due to the Purusha's role in that phenomenon of any kind of understanding or state. So for any of jnana to happen, there is a buddhi and the Purusha, and because the Purusha is purely reflecting or echoing the state of the buddhi, therefore the buddhi vritti and the jnana vritti are same. So avishishta, not different from each other. So buddhi vritti avishishta hi jnana vritti riti akhyayate. Akhyayate means it is known as. So therefore it is said that the jnana vritti is not different from the buddhi vritti. So these are some very interesting things in the sense, because something that we had seen earlier in the first chapter and so on has been described here through a process of quite logical reasoning without having to bring in other forms of, oh, it is a transformation of Prakriti, there is Sattva, Rajatama, and so on. Keeping all of that apart, the chain of reasoning has been established in this particular Bhashya to show that the Purusha is not same as the Buddhi, which is what somebody who is not aware of the Shastras at all. He says, okay, this is me, I am my mind, or I am my body, but ultimately I am the thinker, and so on. So firstly it is said, no, Buddher na sarupa, it is not the same as the Buddhi, but then it is also not something entirely different. Na atyanta virupa. So that is what was elaborated here to show why it is not entirely different, and it culminated in this quote that Vyasa did. He quoted from another Acharya. So he is saying, Buddhi vritti avishishta hi jnana vrittiriti akhyayate. So, and there we see the link back to the Paurushaya Bodha that we had seen earlier.
So the Drashta category and Drushya category are being distinguished in this sutra. And therefore they mention that neither they are identical nor non-identical. So the thing is that if the two things are not identical, Drashta and Drushya, Drashta reference to Purusha Tattva, Atma Tattva, the Aham, the self. So Drashta is the self, and the Drushya is with reference to Buddhi, not the whole scene category that is really described in earlier sutra, Vishesha, Vishesha, Linga, Matra, Lingane, Guna, Parvani. So this Drushya reference is to only Buddhi. That is Drushya. And the Drashta and Drushya, what is the relationship? They are not identical. Not identical because one is insentient, the other one is sentient. One is Jada, the other one is Chetana. Then if that is the case, when they are so distinct, then it should be considered, they are not totally indistinct, they should be distinct. But here, the puzzle is that they are neither distinct nor indistinct. Na sarupaha, na virupaha. Because usually, if we are able to discern that this is different than that, then we don't postulate similarity. But if you postulate similarity between this and that two are similar, then we don't call them dissimilar. But here is a case where the similarity have a kind of mix-up. And that is to be understood here. We have to come out of this kind of mix-up. So now atyanta virupaha. Now this is quite a enigmatic statement when it is not virupaha but are not absolutely distinct. It is why, because of the metapsychological phenomenon which we have seen earlier, with the example of the sphatika, the crystal and the substrate, or lodestone and iron particles, or fireball and iron ball. So here the drashta, the seer, is also not totally unidentical. It is because of this psychological phenomenon of seeming oneness. So the Jada Buddhi becomes seemingly conscious. And therefore now it is very difficult to distinguish between actually conscious, really conscious, and then seemingly conscious. Because then both are identical or almost one. Not only identical, they almost become one. That is what in the Chitta Vritti Sutra you heard the Sankhya Sutra. Ekameva darshanam, kyatireva darshanam. In case of cognition, In valid knowledge, we do not just pointing at the rose say that this is rose. Very integral part of that perception is that I am knower of the rose. I am knower of the rose, and that object is also rose, therefore it is rose. These two conditions are important for cognition, or what is called as valid perception. Valid perception cannot be only of one side, that it is rose. How it is rose? Why it is rose? It is because you are knowing it as a rose. So, therefore, the subjective entity and the substrate of subjective entity, the both are there in that cognition. Therefore, Ekameva darshanam kyatireva darshanam was the Sankhya Sutra, Panchachika Sutra quoted by Vyasa. So, therefore, in this phenomenon of vritti sarupyam, he is describing na atyanta virupaha kasmat shuddho api asau pratyayana pashyayataha. It is not totally distinct. Why? Because of this, that although pure, although metaphysically pure, metaphysically untouched and untouchable, yet there is a phenomenon of pratyayanupashya in our metapsychological aspect. And therefore it is pratyayanupashya. It is, as I said last time with that example of upadrashta by way of spectacles, upanetra. So the upanetra needs netra. Netra being not there, upanetra is meaningless. The spectacles must be on your eyes, and then only you will get the vision. So if you remove the spectacles, object is there, you don't get the clear vision. Or if you remove the eyes from behind the spectacles, object is there, but you don't get even the vision. So that's how the spiritual principle, or the tattva, self-tattva, atma-tattva, is so important, and therefore, and also the seeming oneness which occurs, which is turning out bhasamana chaitanya. So it is because it is overseer. It is secondary seer. In one sense, it is secondary seer, because it really doesn't see anything. It doesn't have to see, it doesn't see. That is how Upanishads have described that self doesn't have eyes, self doesn't have ears, self doesn't have nose, self doesn't have tongue. But all these senses sense because of him. Because he is present, they all become sensory organs. Therefore, they sense vision, they sense sound, they sense touch, etc., etc., etc. So this is a marvel in our embodiment, that he is the upadrashta. He is described as pratyayanupashya. And then, therefore, what happens is that in metapsychological realm, that the self seems to be buddhi itself. It is not two things that we have to distinguish. They almost seem to be one, and one only. That is how the ditto emulation is, that to that extent. We don't see the difference between the real metaphysical self and the seeming consciousness, which says I see, I hear, I taste, I feel, etc., etc. So also in perception, your intelligence is knowing. With the help of senses, the intelligence knows that this is rose. But then you declare that I know it. I am the knower of it. Because we identify ourselves with Buddhi Tattva so much that the two almost seem to be one and the same, not two things identical. So therefore they are not virupa. They are not distinct, because they are not only similar, they almost seem to be one and the same entity. They seem to be only one entity, although they are two. So the buddhi is, as an object of self, is always knowing the buddhi and always in the state of the buddhi. If the buddhi is happy, buddhi tattva is happy, atma tattva is said to be happy. You never say that my psyche is happy, but I am not happy. My psyche is sad, but I am happy. Or my psyche is sad, but I am not sad. It doesn't happen like that. Because that is taken as only one principle. Therefore, it should be understood that although this metaphysical principle of the self is really non-doer, non-endurer, non-knower, it is a substrate for all endurership, all knowership, all experience, and all activity. It is a substrate. If you remove that, then the phenomenon of Jnatritva, Kartrutva, Bhoktrutva will not happen. That's why it is Jnatru Shakti, Kartru Shakti, Bhoktru Shakti. That's the power. If that power is removed, they won't work as that. Like if there is no power running through in an electrical bulb, it doesn't give you light. The power must run through it. The electricity must run through it. So that's a Shakti. That's the potential power. And not the Jnana itself or Jnata itself or Karta itself or Karma itself. See, otherwise, if metaphysically, as has been postulated and quite emphatically, that the self is immutable, doesn't anything happen. Yet, there is advice in Dharma Shastra, and the Brahma Sutra has a sutra, wonderful sutra. So when the Atma Tattva is really akarta, abhokta, but why the advice of karma? So there is a Brahma Sutra, karta shastrarthavatvat is karta, because the Shastra must get meaning. And therefore we are told to do so many things and not do so many things. Although the self is non-doer, whether it is virtue or vice, it is really not there. But then it is responsible. Like in case of the parents, they have a child, minor child. Now minor child does something, and then that means the minor child is agent of such activity, which is perhaps not a right and good activity, dangerous activity, harmful activity. But child has done. But the parents will be taking responsibility. All the parents are not agency to that act. They have not done it. The child has done it. But the child is minor child. And therefore, who is responsible? Parents are responsible for what minor child does. And they do take responsibility. They should take their responsibility. And responsibility is really attached to them. So similarly, this Purusha Tattva, being in this condition of bondage by Sanyoga, becomes responsible for all that the Buddhi might be doing, Buddhi might be seeing, Buddhi might be experiencing. It cannot say that I am metaphysically pure and therefore it doesn't get afflicted to me. That's not the case. Like the parents have to, or like the king is accountable for victory or defeat in a battle, which we have seen as an example. So understand the depth of those examples. Don't just superficially look at those examples. So as parents are responsible, the drashta is responsible because the drashta is embedded in the whole prakritic matter and the buddhi tattva. And therefore, not totally dissimilar. So, this is how we are trying to put across how the two things are neither similar, not dissimilar, similar but not dissimilar, dissimilar but and also similar. So, the metapsychological realm is such that such things are happening in it. And therefore, drashta is responsible for what the buddhi experiences, for what buddhi does, for what Buddhi knows. It can't just shirk from any responsibility as a seer principle and cannot say that Buddhi saw, it's not me. Buddhi is its attachment. It is attached to it because of the sanyoga. This is the kind of that sanyoga. Drashtru drashya sanyoga, which is heya hetu. The drashta, although pure, yet it's not pure but not impure, but impure. But although pure, is responsible for what the buddhi carries out as its business and activity. Perception, sensation, cognition, activity, experience, etc., etc. So, Purusha Tattva is Bhoktru Shakti. Purusha Tattva is Gnatru Shakti. And Kartru Shakti. And therefore, it is responsible. Therefore, this enigmatic statement, similar and not similar, similar but dissimilar, not dissimilar but not similar, all these enigmatic statements have come to explain this situation where we have the cause of this heya, the cause of avoidable. Drashtru drashya yoga is of that nature. So just as in Vrutti Sarupya, we saw delineated with this with the help of examples, the same examples here have to be taken and understood and taken in right perspective to see how drashta is shuddha but pratyayanupashya. What is this pratyayanupashya? Anupashya, upadrashta. So it's the mysticism in metapsychological realm. Don't look at it as something physical reality and therefore you will understand like you understand physical realities. It is in the realm of mysticism. The whole metapsychological aspects are in under thick cloud of mysticism. And therefore we must try to see something like silver lining. Sometimes we get in overcast clouds. It's not that you will be seeing the sun clearly, which is behind the clouds. But there will be silver lining. So similar is a mysticism. And therefore we have to understand this. It's not something physical phenomenon, therefore we can distinguish. Like apples and oranges, we can distinguish. To what extent they are similar, maybe in some chemical properties similar, but then we say it is similar. Both are fruits, both are of the class of the fruits. So similar class of fruits, but then dissimilar as well. Similar as well as dissimilar. Not similar and not dissimilar. But that is in the physical realm. So this should not be looked at from that perspective. There is a lot of mysticism in this nominal aspects. So that's how this has to be understood. The relationship between the buddhi and purusha is so unique. No relationship is like that. But to understand, we are given examples such as crystal and the color, flower and crystal, or fireball and iron ball, lodestone and iron particles. This is just to have little bit understanding, little bit getting an entry into the zone of mysticism. Anyway, it has really unfathomable depth. What you and me will understand and what yogis will understand, it is great. At depth, they will understand something. We will understand something superficial, peripheral. You can be sitting at the beach and you can say, I am seeing that at the sea. I know the sea up to horizon. So we are only seeing the surface of the sea. But the sea divers, they dive into the sea and go to 500 meters, 1000 meters, 1500 meters, 2000 meters, 3000 meters plus. What they see in ocean is altogether different. So yogis are like divers in oceans. So they dive into the ocean of this sanyoga. And we are only looking at the sanyoga that appears for us by being on the beach We are looking at that ocean and we are trying to describe the ocean as it appears on surface, the waves, the ripples, the foam, etc. But what is at the depth of the ocean is altogether different. So we are only qualified to understand this by being at the sea beach and look at the sea, describe the sea, conceive the sea. But then if somebody dives into that sea, it will be different revelation, or revelation will be more crystal clear. It's not that it will be totally differently understood, but it will be understood more with greater clarity, conspicuity as to how they are similar and dissimilar. We will understand on one plane how they are neither similar nor dissimilar. But yogi's understanding of that, how it is not similar and not dissimilar, will be different because of the depth. Anyway, it is very, very fascinating subject because it is in the realm of metapsychology, metaphysical self, metaphysical buddhi, and their conjunction, union, creating a metapsychical world. And in that world, they are neither similar nor dissimilar. They are similar and not dissimilar. So this enigmatic statement comes here. Okay.
Yes. So the fact that it cannot be described in words, it is sort of fundamental to it. It is like it says in the Shruti, yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha. So it is of the nature that it cannot be described in words. That's one of its fundamental nature itself. The other thing to just clarify is the Shakti part of it, Drishi Shakti, Bhoktri Shakti, and so on, Chiti Shakti. So it is not to be referred to as it has that Shakti. Okay, so there is no having of a Shakti that is happening in the Purusha, because then that brings in Dharmi Dharma Bhava, Guna Guni Bhava, which is not said to exist at all. It is just in the description, those terms are used to refer to the Purusha to be better able to explain the matter at hand. So in some places it is referred to as Chiti Shakti if that is the topic of discussion, Bhoktri Shakti if that is the topic of discussion, but it all refers to the Purusha entity that we are looking at. So with this we finish the Sutra 2.20, Drashta Drishimatraha Shuddhopi Pratyayanupashyah. Then comes Sutra 21, 2.21, that says Tadartha eva drishyasya atma. So this is a small sutra with a very small bhashya, but the sutra is also often wrongly translated in some cases, so let's carefully understand. So the sutra again, 2.21 is Tadartha eva drishyasya atma. So Tadartha eva drishyasya atma. So sometimes it is wrongly translated as that is why the Purusha is the soul of the Prakriti. That is not what this sutra says. The sutra does not mean that to say that is why the Purusha is the soul of the Prakriti. What is being said here is Tadarthaha. Here Tad refers to the Drashta, the Purusha, and that is by continuation from the previous sutra, because Drashta Drishimatraha Shuddhopi Pratyayanupashyah, all of these terms, Drashta, Drishimatraha, and Pratyayanupashyah, and as well as Shuddhaha, so all of the terms there were referring to the Purusha. In continuation, Tadarthaha, so there the Tad refers to the Purusha. Now, Tadarthaha Drishyasya Atma. So the Atma, here Atma does not refer to the soul or the Jivatma or any of these metaphysical entities. Atma refers to what the linguistic meaning of it, the Swarupa. The Swarupa of the Drishya is Tadarthaha, means Tasmai, for the Purusha. So here again it is sort of the teleological aspect. It is to say that the Drishya Swarupa, the Drishya's own form and nature and everything is to be for the Purusha. Tadarthaha eva drishyasya atma. So the Swarupa, the existence of the Drishya, here the Drishya is everything in the seen category, more specifically the Buddhi and the Chitta that we were referring to. So you could say that Drishya here is buddhyaparudha bhutendriyatmaka gunatraya. Okay, so you could say that. So the through cognition, whatever has been imposed or cognized, superimposed on the buddhi, and is of the nature of bhutendriya and made up of gunatraya, all of that is drishya. That the swarupa, the self, the nature of the drishya is for the purpose of the purusha. Tadartha eva drishyasya atma, which means the drishya has no other purpose, has no other reason to exist other than that for the purusha. And as we have seen, what does for the purusha mean? It means bhoga apavargartham, for the bhoga and the apavarga of the purusha. So the Sutra 2.21 is saying tadartha eva drishyasya atma. So in one of the elaborations, it is said drashtrartha eva drishyasya atma bhavati natu drishyartha. So drishya's own self, the drishya's own existence, the existence of the seen category is only for the drashta, for the seer, and not for the drishya itself. Drashtartha eva drishyasya atma bhavati natu drishyartha. So Vyasa says, दृशि रूपस्य पुरुषस्य कर्म रूपताम आपन्नम दृश्यम इति तदर्थ एव दृश्यस्य आत्मा भवति. So why is it said? So Vyasa is elaborating. So दृशि रूपस्य पुरुषस्य, the purusha, कीदृशः purusha, what kind of purusha here? The purusha who is of the दृशि रूpa, who is the seer, of the nature of being the seer, of this purusha, of the seer purusha. Karma rupatam apannam. So the karma rupatam apannam drishyam. So what drishya? This is the drishya which has become the karma, the object. Okay. So the object of that seeing is the drishya. So the drishya which has apannam means obtained, achieved or attained the state of being the object of the seer. So karma rupatam apannam drishyam iti tadartha eva drishyasya atma. So that is why the drishya is for the purusha alone. The drishya's nature, the swarupa, its purpose, its nature, its existence is to be for the purusha. So it is of the purusha alone. In another elsewhere it is nicely said that gunaha pararthaha संहत्यकारित्वात् इत्यादि अनुमानेन दृश्य अतिरिक्तस्य पुरुषस्य सिद्धिः इति भावः. So there is another nice way of looking at it is, now that we have seen that gunas are for the other, gunas are pararthaha, they have no purpose of their own. And again samhatyakaritvat, which we have also seen, all the entities are sort of come together from parts. And like it was described in, I think, the previous session or one before that, whenever something has been put together for parts, it is not something that is for itself. It is always for some purpose that is outside of itself. So, gunaha pararthaha samvatyakaritvat ityadi anumanena, through all this reasoning and inferences, drishya atiriktasya purushasya siddhihi. By all of this description, there is something other than the drishya which is established, which is the purusha. So the purusha is also established in another way through a line of reasoning, going through the gunatmakatvam of the drishya, the fact that they are made up of gunas, the fact that gunas are parartha for the other and for not for themselves. Also the samvatyakaritvat, because it is a aggregate of things which by a certain nyaya is always something for the other, and by this the other, which is the purusha, is established. And there this sutra is sort of affirming that by saying tadartha eva drishyasya atma, the drishya and its very nature is for the purpose of the purusha. So that is Sutra 2.21 with its bhashya.
So the drashta drushya, their relationship is being further explained out. So just now I told you that Atma, Drishyasya Atma, it has come in linguistic sense. Like for example, something that is very beloved to us, we declare that as if that is our soul. That means if that is not existing, I will also not exist. Many times the beloved and lover and beloved have this conversation. So without you, I won't exist. I will perish. That means my existence, my soul is in you, is in your form. So if that you are removed from my life, I am void. I cease to exist. So that's the linguistic expression for Atma. So something very coveted, very, very beloved to something, we try to almost invest our very existence into that object or that person. So it's a complete investment of our existence into that object which is so beloved, or in that person which is so beloved. And then we say, you are my soul, or it is my soul. For a musician, his instrument is his soul. Because otherwise he almost loses the identity if the instrument is destroyed. So in that linguistic sense, the Atma word has come. Otherwise, you might look at the Atma word as a metaphysical entity. So he explains the closeness of the two by bringing this expression that tad artha, tad means drashta. The purpose of drashta, the very purpose of drashta is the very soul of drushya. The purpose of drashta, which is bhoga apavargartata, or whatever is the purpose of very sphere principle, that purpose itself is very soul of the drushya category. Therefore, if that soul is removed, then the drushya category almost ceases to exist. So see, the relationship is of the nature of lover and beloved. How long and how much can you separate the two? Or beloved object of a person. Something is such a beloved object of a person, you just can't separate it or snatch it, possess it yourself and make that person dispossessing that object. The person is almost dead, almost dying, or almost goes to die. Because the object is so fond to him, or that person is so fond to him, that without that person and that thing, he really cannot exist or cannot like to exist even. So that's the affiliation. That's the bondage. That's the bond. So here, the very purpose of drashta, tad artha. What is the purpose of drashta is bhoga apavarga. So that purpose is the soul of entire drushya category. For us to understand the relationship that is developed between the drashta and drushya. See, otherwise we think there's so much of this part of creation and universe, we think it is all waste. A stark materialist will say, what is the use of that neighboring galaxy? I'm in my galaxy, and that galaxy is perhaps useless, or perhaps even harmful. Like we mortals, petty mortals, we say the mosquito is not only useless, it is harmful. So we want to do away with mosquitoes, worms, etc., etc. Yes, it might be not purpose for you, but you can't say it is not purpose for the very entity of Purusha Tattva. That's why it was told to you sometimes that whole universe, it is not abundant of waste, but it has a purpose. You may not go and live and thrive there. That doesn't mean that the soul cannot be there, if you recall. The Atma cannot be there. The self cannot be there. The self is everywhere. The whole creation, a wide expanse of the whole creation is for the purpose of Drashta Tattva. Because you can argue, moon is not useful, remote stars are not useful, all those planets are not useful, no, nebula are not useful, galaxy is not useful for me. This is a very mean outlook. In materialism, frame of materialism, this can happen. Oh, it is useless for me, therefore it is useless part of creation. What is useless for you, you cannot just tag it as useless part of creation. It is useful to something, perhaps it is life to something. What is useless to something is life to something. The mosquito is life for some lizards. Some creatures will live on mosquitoes. They consume mosquitoes. That is their food. Jivo jivasya jivanam. So what is waste for you cannot be, or what is harmful for you, you cannot say it should be banished. There is drashta principle in various manifestations. So it is definitely having purpose. So the drushya, and not only that, but it is the serving drashta is very atma in the linguistic sense that you just were now told. So drishyasya atma. That means the drashya will not exist, or will cease to exist, or will be almost non-existent, if not physically. It will be non-existent if the purpose of drashta is removed. So it thrives on purpose of drashta. It doesn't live for purpose of drashta. Like a baby can live without the parents. For some reason, parents are no more there, the child is still there. It will thrive. So, child depends on parents. But how much? Parents might be dead, yet the child is living. But then if it is the case of that bond, like saying that is my soul, my music is my soul, my art is my soul, my pursuit is my soul, my beloved is my soul, this thing is my soul, that thing is my soul. We invest our very existence into that. And therefore, Krishna has invested its existence into very purpose of drashta. That's the relationship you should understand. You must have a little poetic mind, or maybe romantic mind, to understand what is this relationship. That's why the word Atma has come. Don't mistake Atma to a metaphysical expression here. As Srini said, it's a linguistic expression. So it is so coveted, purpose of drashta is so coveted to the drashya, that no part of drashya will be existing with that purpose not there. The bhoga pavargarthata is not just purpose of Purusha, but that is the soul of Prakriti to be really existing in all its spirits. And without that purpose, it is almost non-existent, or it will non-exist, or it will be paralyzed. So the purpose, bhoga, pavargarthata, are not only for Purusha, because we look at them as Purushartha. They are purpose of Purusha. But what are these purpose of Purusha for Drashya category? Is that it is almost Atma. It is so coveted. Subserving the purposes is such a covet to the entire Drashya category that it almost ceases to exist. It is almost non-existent. It loses all springs to exist. There's a wonderful sutra in that sense, the linguistic dimension of it. So the poetry in Patanjali can be also identified here. That is quite poetic in giving this sutra. Tadartha eva drushyasyatma. So we have to understand what he is trying to convey. That relationship between the drushya and purpose of drashta. It is almost a relationship of the nature of intense lover and intense beloved. Purpose of the Purusha, the purpose of drashta, and the very drushya. That is why it is related to Purusha. So you can read a lot of poetry in it at a later stage in your pursuit of the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. But it's very interesting sutra. So Swarupantu Pararupena Pratilabdatmakam Bhoga Apavargataya Putayam Purushena na Dushyate. The Bhoga Apavargatata. Purusha to have is his Swarupa revealed is also the purpose of Prakriti. And to have a Bhoga which is not looking at one's own nature, when it is looking at other things, other objects, for the sake of Sukha Dukkha, that is Bhoga. So for both the purposes, whether it is Apavarga purpose or Bhoga purpose, for both the purposes are so coveted to Drushya category, that is Buddhi. For Buddhi, that it almost ceases to exist without the purpose in place. Either the purposes should be there or both the purposes should be still there. Like in our case, who are trying to crawl into Adhyatmic realm, we have both the purposes. At times we want Apavargarthata, at times we want Bhogarthata. So we are trying to keep our feet on both the stones. So both are Atma, to Drushya, the Buddhi. So see, try to understand this bond between Purushartha, Bhoga Apavargatata, and Drushya, the Buddhi. It's almost Atma. It is almost its soul, as we use the word in literal sense or in linguistics. So it's a fascinating sutra. And therefore, we will come to know, because of this being the soul of it, then what is its status?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll stop here today. So we have covered 2.20 and 2.21. Next time we'll look at a small preamble by Vyasa to 2.22 and then cover the Sutra 2.22. So let's recite the shlokas on Guruji and stop. Vaijñānikam pravaktritva आसनेषु कलाविदं योगाभ्यासे च तत्त्वज्ञं वन्देऽहं सुन्दरं गुरुं योगवृक्षो हि लोकेऽस्मिन् यत्प्रेरणेन वर्धितः योगाचार्यगुरो तुभ्यं सुन्दराय नमो नमः. Thank you.
Namaskar, all of you. Namaskar.